So today I'm going to be continuing the story of Genesis. I'm almost done. I think I only have one more week. So his 10 brothers, he sent them and he told them to go to Egypt to go get some grain, go get some food. Of course, he didn't send the little brother because he was the only one left between Joseph and him. He was the only one left from that mother. So the dad would not allow him to get out of his sight. So here goes Joseph's 10 brothers. They show up in Egypt. So in chapter 42, verse 6, it says, "Now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, 'Where do you come from?' And they said, 'From the land of Canaan, to buy food.' So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them and said to them, 'You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land.' And they said to him, 'No, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food.'" It's so crazy how God unfolds something that was what, maybe 13 years before? So somewhere around there, maybe a little bit more by this point, where he remembered in that moment the dreams that he had about his brothers bowing to him. And this is exactly how a prophetic word is supposed to be done in our life. Because Joseph was not playing out his life based on that word. He was not playing it out. As a matter of fact, he couldn't. He was either a slave or in prison. So it's not like he could. And Joseph did not make it happen. God set up everything in order for Joseph to be in the perfect place at the perfect time, and so that his brothers can come. They had no idea that they were bowing before their brother. They had no idea that this was their brother. And plus, he could never have imagined that he would have to go through all that he went through in order for that word to come to pass. I mean, when God shows us something amazing, we're thinking all grand, and we're like, oh, that's cool, I remember before God would ask me, if I'm willing to do this or that. And I'm like, yes, Lord, yes, I'm a servant. I will obey and I will do whatever you ask of me. And then things start to happen and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. This was not part of the deal, Lord, And I would tell him, this was not part of my deal. My deal, my side, And he was like, no, this is part of my plan. This is what's going to prepare you and get you ready for what I have. And I'm like, So then the next time comes around, are you willing to do this? Are you willing to do that? Wait a minute. Hold up. I'm not so quick to jump on it now. You know what I mean? But because my heart wants to serve my God, I'm like, Lord, whatever. It's not about me. It's about you. So Joseph could never have imagined any of this. And for him, it always seemed impossible. But yet, in this very moment, impossible became possible. And for me, it's kind of like, sometimes it feels like our promises are impossible. Sometimes it feels like our dreams are impossible. Sometimes it feels like the prophetic word that has been spoken over our life time and time and time again. Sometimes that feels impossible. But my answer is, if it feels impossible, then good. Then good. We're in the right place. We're in the right moment. Because it feels impossible, it means that only God can make it happen. Because when it's God, it's going to happen. His word does not come back void. So it says that Joseph recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. And he was talking to them through a translator. So he was pretty much talking roughly to them, and he was accusing them of being spies. But I don't think it's because he was mad necessarily. He was trying to find a way to get his brother Benjamin to them. And the only way they can clear their name, because he started asking them questions. Who's your father? Or who's this? And who's that? And they were answering. So he knew that there was a little brother, obviously, because it was his brother. And in order for them to clear their name, they had to bring Benjamin. That was the only way he was going to clear their name. So he was making an excuse, and he had to accuse them so that they had no other way. He was pretty much forcing their hand. You want to clear your name, and I'm not going to accuse you of being a spy. You have to bring me your little brother. And he told them, I'll keep one of your brothers here with me, and you, the rest of you, go off, go take food back, and do not come back until you bring your little brother with you. And it was like a stern warning. So this is what happened, They had no choice. They had to leave one of the brothers there. And then it goes, I'm going to jump down to verse 21. And it says, then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, speaking of Joseph. For we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again and talked with them. And he took Simon from them and bound him before their eyes. It's like here their guilt was coming back. Their guilt never left them. The brothers' guilt, they knew they were wrong. They knew they did something wrong. And now they're like, God is judging us. God is, this is coming back to us because of our guilt. But can we even begin to imagine what Joseph felt in this moment? Imagine. Standing before him are the very people that did him wrong, that caused all this harm in his life. If he would have had bitterness or anger, he easily could have had them killed. Remember, he's second in command. Especially if he's telling them, oh, you guys are spies. I'm accusing you of spies. Kill them. They're here to do the land harm. But he didn't do that. He didn't do that. They wouldn't even second guess him. If he told them, hey, have them killed, they wouldn't second guess Joseph. They trusted Joseph. They believed in Joseph. But he didn't. Instead, yes, he kept one of the brothers as surety so that he knew they had to return. But he sent them away with provision. He put their money back in their bags, and he sent them with food, and he sent them back home. And he didn't do them harm. He actually had to turn around. He had to go run to his room or somewhere and wept. That's how broken he was in that moment. He remembered all these different memories coming back to him. He remembered everything that happened. He felt the pain. He felt the anguish. The brothers knew his anguish. The brothers are here talking about it. We saw the anguish in his soul. But yet, he still did them good. Now, he sent them away. They went home, and they had to share with their dad what happened. Obviously, at this point, the dad is heartbroken. Now you're going to try to take my other son from me? Nope, not happening. He's staying here, and, and he was refusing to let him go. But then the famine started getting worse, and the famine started getting worse. So now he had to allow it. In order for them to get food, he had to allow it. Then they returned to Egypt, but this time they returned with his little brother. And when Joseph saw his little brother, he told the people to get, a feast going. He fed them. He took them to his house. He made a feast for them. And he sent them again. He was going to send them off with provision. He was like pretty much giving them way more that they were paying for. And they weren't even paying for it because he was giving them their money back. But what he did this time is he put one of his cups in his little brother's bag. He had somebody put a cup in his bag. This way, he's accusing him of stealing, and he had to become his slave. So, Benjamin's got tricks, not Benjamin, Joseph. He has some tricks up his sleeve. So this way, now the excuse was going to be like, no, because the other brothers are like, no, keep me, because, they knew what it was going to do to the dad. And he's like, nope, I'm going to keep the one. My slave will be the one who has my cup. And they freak out, and they're telling Joseph, our dad will die if we don't return with our brother. He'll die. And I want to jump over to chapter 45. And I'm going to start in verse 1. It says, then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, make everyone go out from me. So no one stood with him, while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. Can you imagine? That's how loud you're crying, that your neighbors hear you. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Does my father still live? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, please come near to me. So they came near. Then he said, I am Joseph, your brother, who you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt, and come down to me. Do not tarry. This is the heart of true humility. This is the power of humility. Joseph was not mad at anybody. Joseph was not mad at his brothers. Joseph was not mad at God. Joseph was not mad because he had an understanding. Everything had a reason and a purpose. Brothers, everything that I went through, it was for your good. Brothers, everything that I went through, God had a reason. God had a purpose for me. Here he is reassuring them. He's reassuring the ones that did the harm. He's telling them, God sent me and placed me here for your good. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine telling the person who's hurt you the most, face to face, and telling them, don't worry about it. Don't be hurt. Don't be angry with yourself. God used all of it for his glory. And actually mean it? Are we able to do that? Do we have that kind of heart? Do we have that kind of ability? Do we have that kind of humility? He's telling them the purpose why God sent me here. The reason why captivity was necessary for me was to save lives. Have you come to that understanding? All your pain, all your hurt, everything that you've experienced, everything that you've gone through, everything that could have broken you, everything that you felt was going to break you. Have you gotten to the point where you're saying, that was my captivity, but God is now using that. I'm no longer captive. I'm no longer in prison. I've been set free. God's using it to save lives. Because now my life is a testimony of who Jesus Christ is. My Jesus saved my life. My Jesus healed my soul. My Jesus took me out of bondage, and he put me here to tell you about him. And not just talk to you about religion. To show you that Jesus Christ is alive. He's real. He's still in power. He's still on the throne. There's nobody that can dethrone him. Nobody can dethrone my God. Just because he's silent, it doesn't mean he's not doing his work. It does not mean that he's not doing his job. God is still into deliverance. God is still into saving lives. Has your pain become your purpose? Has what you went through in captivity become the reason why now you have a hunger to go save lives? Do we understand? God's given us the gospel. God has given us the message of salvation. We don't save lives. Jesus Christ saves lives. But if you know Jesus, you have Jesus. And you can give Jesus. I don't want to tell people a fairy tale. I don't want to talk to people about lies. I don't want to share religion with people. I was in religion. Religion is dead. There's no transformation in religion. Religion is just a pattern. It's just day in and day out. There's nothing powerful in my life. There's no transformation in my life. I'm not getting to know God on a deeper level. I'm just coming to church. I'm just listening to the messages, and they're going in one ear and out the other. And I go out and I'm like, yeah, I go to church. Well, good for you. But what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you bringing the message of deliverance? Are you bringing the message of salvation? Has God set you up wherever you're at? Has God set you up to be there? Has God placed you there for a purpose? Has God placed you there? Most of the time when we hate where we're at, it's either right before God's going to shift us and move us, or it's because we hate it because we're not doing his will. We're fighting it. You know what I mean? Sorry about that. You know, we're fighting it. And Joseph straight up told them that what they meant for evil, what they meant to do harm to him, that God actually turned it around for their own deliverance. Okay, that's crazy. Don't worry. Don't worry that you sold me off. You sold me off because God's plan and intention for me to come before you was so that I can deliver you. Wow. Wow. What kind of heart is that? What kind of understanding? Most of the time when we get hurt by people, we see all the negative. We see all the bad. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, they're this and they're that and they're this and they're that. Wait a minute. Before you were hurt, you loved them and all you did was talk good about them. I mean, we do this, right? We do this. We love them and we're hurt and all of a sudden, all the ugly comes out. But he didn't do that. He's like, man, God did this. It wasn't just an act. It was an attitude of the heart. Joseph had an attitude in his heart of humility. And even though he was greater than his brothers in position, he still regarded them as important. He still regarded them. He he regarded them so much because everything that he experienced, he gave it back to God. He kept giving it back to God. He was like, God knew what he was doing with me. You thought you knew what you were doing with me. But all along, God knew what he was doing with me. Joseph trusted God with his life. Joseph trusted whatever God's plan, whatever God allowed in his life, Joseph trusted that process. And he humbled himself to each and every situation. And not with a bitter heart, but with the heart of humility. And the greatest example that we have of an attitude of humility or a heart of humility is Jesus. He came. He gave up everything. He came. He became a man. And he came to serve. He came to serve those that mistreated him, those that did him wrong, those that accused him, those that rejected him. He still came and he served them. I'm going to turn really quick to Matthew 23. In verse 11, it says, "But he who is greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." These are the words of Jesus. These are the words of Jesus. He's saying whoever in his own mind, okay, because, we're fleshy, right? So when we have pride in our life, in our own mind, we begin to start thinking that we deserve a certain honor. We deserve respect. We deserve a certain esteem. People should esteem me. People should have respect for me. People should honor me. They have this. They exalt themselves in their own mind. He says those that exalt themselves in their own mind will be brought low. That means they will be humbled through disappointment. That's crazy. That's crazy. See, when we start to think that we deserve something, and when we don't get it, that's God giving us opportunity to humble ourselves. That's God giving us opportunity because now we're disappointed. Oh, well, they didn't honor me. Oh, well, they didn't esteem me. Oh, that they didn't do this and they didn't do that. We're being brought low. We're being brought low. We're nobody. We're nobody. The moment we start thinking we're somebody, it's the moment we need to be humbled. It's the moment we need to allow God to humble us. It says, whoever allows his circumstances or conditions to bring him low will get raised up to honor, respect, and esteem. So whenever we get put in situations or circumstances, and we allow those situations or circumstances to keep us in a healthy state of mind, those are the people that he's going to raise up to honor. Look at Joseph. He allowed every situation and every circumstances to make him low. He didn't think high of himself. He didn't think he deserved something. He didn't think he deserved their honor. He didn't think they deserved his respect. He didn't demand any of it. He didn't think any of that. And this is why God, when the time came, God started raising him higher and higher and higher. And we need to allow that process. See, because when Joseph got to the second in command, that wasn't his first time being in leadership. But each time he got to leadership or each time he got a position, it got stripped from him. A lot of times we get all bent out of shape when something gets stripped from us. But he didn't get bent out of shape. He just said, all right, all right. All right. And when the time came, because he humbled himself, because he truly had humility, God would raise him back up. All of that was just a building. All of that was working in his character. It was working to his character. See, Joseph allowed his circumstances to be the teacher of true humility. Circumstances get thrown at us and we don't love them, we don't like them, we don't want them. But they could be our greatest teacher. They could be our greatest teacher. When you get put in something, that's when you actually make a decision on what kind of Christian you're going to be. That's when you actually make a decision, what kind of attitude are you going to have? See, because we can portray an attitude to one another, right? Like, you know, if something's happening, something's hard and something's wrong, or somebody's afflicting you, or you're in a bad situation, people can be like, how are you? Oh, I'm good. And you put on the face. But on the inside, you're like torn and you're hurt and you're mad and you're angry. God knows. God knows all these things. God knows our very heart. God knows the motive and intentions of our heart. I want my circumstances to continue to be my teacher, because that's what's going to keep us growing and learning. And if we're submitting ourselves under the power of God, then any situation we face, we come into it with an understanding, God, you know what you're doing. If this doesn't belong in my life, take it out. Remove it. Have your way. Remove them. You know what I mean? Like whatever the situation is, I don't know. But Lord, if this is part of your will, if this is part of what's going to teach me, if this is part of what's going to train me, if this is part of what's going to humble me, Lord, have your way. And let your heart attitude be right. Let your attitude be right. See, Joseph allowed all these things to be his teacher, and he served whoever was over him. He served them. He was an attendant to them. He was always doing them good. He served them no matter the situation. And the one thing that us as Christians, we need to watch out for is false humility. And false humility a lot of the times is when we think we're humbling ourselves, but the attitude of our heart, we're upset. You know what I mean? We're mad. But we're over here saying we're humbling ourselves. Oh, well, we're not really. You know what I mean? We're not really. And the thing is, the only way we know if we have true humility or not is when we get put in situations. Because a lot of times we hear people say, oh, I'm humble. Well, the fact that you're saying you're humble probably means you're not humble. The fact that you're saying you have humility probably means you do not have humility. You know what I mean? Because the moment we get put in situations we don't like, that's when we're going to find out what we're actually made of. That's when we're going to find out if we really are submitted to the will of God, or if we're going to buck and we're going to kick and we're going to fight. Do we have true humility, or is it a false humility? Are we deceiving ourselves thinking we have humility, but the attitude of our heart is bitter? The attitude of our heart is upset. The attitude of our heart is we're in disagreement with God's will. Joseph was not in disagreement with God's will. Jesus Christ was not in disagreement with the Father's will. He said, if this cup can pass me by, but nevertheless, Lord, not my will, but yours. Joseph could never have gotten to great leadership if he didn't learn how to be a servant first. A lot of times we want to be in the front. You know what I mean? We want to be the ones to say stuff. We want to be the ones to do things. We want to be the ones to be heard. But if we've never known what it was to serve, then we just can't grasp those concepts. You know what I mean? Jesus showed us that he came to serve, not be served. And we must learn how to follow before we can ever learn how to lead. If we don't know how to follow, then how do we expect people to follow us? You know what I mean? It's easy to tell people what to do. I mean, that's easy. I mean, you can go anywhere and any place. You can go to the grocery store, the store, and you can just start telling people what to do. But it doesn't mean they're going to listen. They're not going to listen. A true leader leads through inspiration. A true leader leads by them laying down their life, by them sacrificing more than you. Joseph did all that. He sacrificed his whole life to get him to the place where he can serve a whole country. And not just the country of Egypt, all the surrounding areas that were coming to him. He was the one that was looking out for them. And when his brothers came and when he had to face his past, he realized in that moment that there was truly no bitterness. He was truly holding nothing against him. As a matter of fact, all he wanted was to do them good. All he wanted, all he was longing for was his brother. All he was longing for was his dad. All he wanted to do was to reassure them. We need to understand that if we have a true heart of humility, then we're going to be able to be wherever God has placed us and be willing to be there as a light. And not just be as a light, but we're going to lay our lives down. We're going to be willing to do the sacrificing for the good of those around us. For the good. It's not for our ambitions. It's not for our self-gain. It's not for our selfish ways. It's not for our own ideas, because our ideas have nothing to do with God's ideas. You know what I mean? Otherwise, we're trying to tell God what to do. As if we know better than God. Like one time God rebuked me. He's like, where were you when I created this and when I created that? He talked to me like he talked to Job. Oh, you think you're so smart? Where were you when this happened? Where were you when that happened? Scratch that, Lord. Let's act like that never happened, Put me back in my place. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not even promised tomorrow. Am I living my life today in a heart of humility? Am I living my life today in such a way where I'm not holding all these grudges? I'm not holding all these things. There is no time to waste on holding on to our past. Joseph let it go. Joseph let all those things go so he can serve greatly. So he can become all that God had for him. And because he humbled himself in every situation, or he allowed these situations to humble him, should I say, God raised him up. You want to see God's promises in your life? Humble yourself. Let God do it. You want to see God's promises fulfilled? You want to see all those dreams, all those hopes, all those things that you think are impossible? You want to see them come to pass? You want to see the prophetic words come to pass in your life? Let it all go. Let it all go. And let God. Let God take over. Let God intervene in your situation. Let God be the one to make the room for you. Let God be the one that not only, places you exactly where you belong, but it's going to be him, the one that makes it all happen. All you were doing was being obedient. All we were doing was just letting him have his way in our heart. Our heart, we need to let God in and truly let him in. And let him do what he wants to do so that we can feel his presence, so we can feel his power, so we can be blessed by him. Amen? God, we give you glory. We give you praise, Lord. Lord, there is no one like you. You know us from the inside out.